Hello, welcome to my second little video where I try out the Creality Falcon 2 laser engraver 22 watt version. And for this little test I've decided to have a go at making one of those little scenes that are made up of multiple slices all stacked together. Not entirely sure what they're called. So having decided on the subject and what it's all going to roughly look like, I get to work drawing the shapes out, importing them into Lightburn, firing up the laser and getting it to cut all the shapes out. It's all ridiculously simple. First job is to press the frame button so the laser goes round and round, showing you where the extremities of the cuts will be, and you can adjust the position of the wood manually yourself or using the arrow keys to nudge the starting position of the laser. Once you're happy, press the go button and off it goes. You can see there's no scorch marks on the surface of the wood. That's thanks to the compressor that you can hear blowing air over the surface as it cuts. I'm sure I could optimize the settings to cut faster, but the whole thing's so quick I don't really need to. It's plenty fast enough as it is. I had considered doing this stacked layers technique to make a scene long before I got the laser cutter, and I was going to use my Cricut, but I would have been limited to card or maybe thin balsa wood. I never got around to it because I was very concerned that the card would warp badly when I started painting it. I think the usual technique is to start with coloured card or paper and just cut the shapes out and leave it as is, but I really wanted to detail paint the individual layers, and cutting it all out of thin ply largely solved the warping issue, although you still have to be a bit careful. You mustn't get it too wet or it could still warp. You might be wondering why I chose a cave, because I had considered a scene through a forest with deer and birds, maybe some rabbits bouncing along, but then I thought, nah, fiery cave of doom, that's more me. This is almost 2 slices done, 8 to go. The whole process of drawing out the layers in my favoured drawing program, inputting them into Lightburn and cutting them out on the laser, I think it was less than 1 hour start to finish, which is hard to get my head around when I'm used to 3D printing where there's often 12-hour wait times. Here I get a first look of how all the slices will come together. Now I've got to make the big decision of how far apart I'm going to make all the layers. Here I'm seeing that it looks like just 2mm apart, but I'll soon decide I want it much wider than that. What I'm trying to work out now is some sort of system where the gaps get larger as the scene comes forward. Just adding an extra millimetre each time didn't seem to work, so then I tried exponential, which, as you would imagine, got too big too quick. So I settled on a projection of lines on an arc. I haven't seen my pair of compasses in decades, so I had to improvise, and the idea is mark off evenly spaced chords on that circle and project them down onto a flat plane. I'm sure it's got a mathematical term for what you end up with, but since I'm more than 40 years away from a maths class, if I ever knew, I don't now. I drew up the spacing properly on the computer and printed it out, and here I'm giving it a little test before committing myself totally and making the box that it all sits in. Now I know the size I need to make the box. It's a simple matter of going over to the Make a Case website, where all you have to do is input the dimensions of the case and it automatically generates all the files. Now I need an addition to the files because I want little grooves where the layers can slide into. So I've taken the G-code Make a Case generates, opened it up in Lightburn, and using its drawing tools added the little thin rectangles I needed and set them to solid fill, which is a mode for engraving. So with a little bit of testing about the laser power and speed, I worked out what setting I needed for those rectangles to be burnt 1mm deep, and I was very pleased when the whole thing came out perfect first time. I've cut a window in the top as I thought the box is quite deep and it will need some extra light in there, especially since it's supposed to be a fiery cave and I'm trying to get away with not putting any lights in there. So I've glued everything up, assembled the box all but the top lid, so all the layers can be slid in and out as necessary until the final assembly. I'm going to be painting all the layers with oil paints, and just about the best surface to paint oils on is gesso, and I've got a very old tub of the stuff that is getting quite thick, which is fine here as I don't want a smooth surface, I want a bit of texture. So the plan is to crudely slap the gesso all over the surface, let it dry, and then painting can begin. I need a little bit of clean up where the edges of the layers meet the channels in the box. The box itself I gave a spray with black primer and a quick test fit to see if everything's still okay, and then on to painting. The colours I'm using are cadmium yellow hue, cadmium red light hue, cadmium yellow light hue, burnt umber, titanium white and lamp black, and the paints are Winsor & Newton Griffin, which are actually alkyds, which are fast drying oils. They'll be fairly touch dry in about 4 hours, which is a lot better than the 2 days to a week traditional oils take. The plan is to get some initial layers down, largely to get rid of the white, and I thought it a good idea to have the initial layer, the fiery colours, where I can put darker on top, leaving the fiery colour to show through in places. After the first layer dried, I'm now going in with some black edges and random dabs here and there. This is still the under layer, so nothing has to be neat. And now on to painting the final layers. While I'm doing this, I'm looking at cave wall reference, although there's not a great deal to it. I'm basically just replicating the sort of shapes the holes I've cut make, just making it look like there's more of them, because on those edges is where the light catches. So that's where I'm putting the light yellows. You have to be very careful when you're painting reds. It's tempting to add white when you want it to be brighter, but red and white just make pink. So to lighten red, use yellow. And if that's not light enough, once it's almost pure yellow, then it's possible to add a little bit of white, but very sparingly. The final thing to paint is a little tiny patch at the back of the box. Now I felt the whole little diorama needed some idea as to scale. At the moment this cave could be 2 feet high, it could be 1,000 feet high. So I need some figures to give it scale. Now my new favourite thing to do is to use the laser cutter to cut very thin stainless steel. So I'm going to cut out some sort of monster to go at the back and a couple of little figures to, as I say, aid with the scale of the thing. A quick spray of black primer, and this time I'm using acrylics. I didn't get the laser cutter to completely cut the figures out. I left little tabs as the stainless steel comes on quite tightly rolled little tubes, rolled up tubes, which is not that easy to flatten out, so it has a bit of a curve to it. And if you use the cutter to completely cut out the shape, it acts as a spring and can fire itself to God knows where. And the worst where is just a few millimeters across the next bit is trying to cut. As the stainless steel is only 0.05 millimeters thick, you can do the final cut through those tabs with a scalpel or craft knife. Just takes a bit of pressure. Now for the monster, any passing resemblance to the Balrog is purely coincidental. And for the main figure, any resemblance to Gandalf is also purely coincidental. You can make up your own mind what they really are. It now just needs some of the paint removed, so I've got a good gluing surface to add it to one of the layers. And now the moment of truth. I'm going to glue all the layers in place so there's no going back. Sliding the layers down the grooves was a little bit tricky, but this time as I'm adding super glue in those grooves, it's acting as a kind of lubricant and they're sliding in much simpler, which is interesting. The top edge was gaping a little bit at the top, so I decided to weigh it down for a little while before continuing. The final step is to glue the lid on. If you remember, this has a large hole in it to allow some light in there, but I didn't want it to be completely open, so I'm just gluing some dark coloured acetate, which is left over from a previous project where I was doing stained glass windows for the Gothic arches. So never throw anything away, it often becomes useful later on. And there we have it, the Cave of Fiery Doom, or the Fiery Cave of Doom. Just a little project that helped me play with the laser cutter. I hope you enjoyed it, but next time I'll be back to building something a little bit more substantial. So I hope to see you on the next video, and thank you for watching.